Great.
Yep.
Okay. So this webinar is on selecting an AMI system, some of the peripheral information that's going to help you with that. And specifically, we're going to talk about some of the benefits of cellular, fixed, and hybrid. Everybody on this panelist are from the industry, and they are experienced professionals with AMI experience. We have some operations side, we have some customer service side. And with their experience in deployment and the implementation of these systems, we're going to have a roundtable discussion that's going to help. Hopefully you guys, anybody who is in the process of it, learn from it. The question and answer and the chat on the bottom of your screen, your Zoom, anytime, please ask, we'll try to address them right away. This is a very casual discussion. We have talked to the panelists. They know that whether they had a really good experience or a really bad experience, to try to leave names out of it. The names protect the innocent and the guilty, I guess. So starting off, let's see, we're going to go over intros. I'm going to talk about some of the experiences that the panelists have, and we're going to field questions, like I said, through the chat. Your time is very available to us. So we're going to, this will end pretty hard stop at 10:50, so people can do what they need to do. And we were able to get in for the main water operator's license. We got credits for this. So at the end of this, make sure that you put in either directly through the chat or through an email your license number so we can submit that. And let's see, with that, I'll start with Jason. Jason is a superintendent in North Conway, New Hampshire. Prior to that, he served as the public works director in Farmington, New Hampshire. And in both places, Jason was part of the meter replacement program for both residential and commercial. And Kathleen is a recognized expert in customer service and utility billing for water systems. She considers herself a military brat who has moved all over the country, but then landed back in beautiful coast of Maine. She has been in the water industry for almost 40 years. And Troy is currently an AMI specialist with about 11,000 accounts near Yakima, Washington. And hence his dark image. He is talking to us pre-sunrise, so we appreciate the early morning. And you've been involved in all aspects of including implementation and training of AMI systems throughout your career. And John has over 2 decades in working with water meters and related infrastructure with the city of Newton. And he is, I believe, the only panelist who is in the beginning of an AMI implementation. So his honeymoon phase is still going on. So we'll get to hear about that. And Steve Cox, 25 years as a water operations experience, upper management in both consumer and investor-owned utilities. And he has developed a passion for balancing the need of customers, employees, and the environment through transparent, data-driven decisions. And Steve has been on the Rayburn team for under a year, but we relied on him for this panelist for his expertise. So his consulting hat is out the window. And with that, for general information, for some of you guys, bear with us, but we think it's a good idea to really start off with some of the basics here. So an AMI system, which all of us know our industry has a bunch of acronyms, and this is the Advanced Metering Infrastructure, okay? So the traditional method was setting up data collectors and repeaters, towers on your water tower, telephone poles. What's required for that is a propagation study. We're going to touch on that. And the utility owns and controls that infrastructure. It's their network. On the cellular side, which is relatively new, that is relying on the infrastructure of the provider, right? Verizon, AT&T, whoever. And that requires a cell coverage study by the providers. That's something you would get and look at before you make a decision. And the benefit there is no collectors and repeaters are required. And then there's the hybrid, which John will specifically be talking about. That's what he's installing, is a combination of fixed network and cellular. Okay. And so we're going to first go real quick. This is your town, USA. And you've got your infrastructure of the water department. And then I know you all have really fancy office buildings. That's sarcasm. And your customers. So during an AMI implementation, some of you might have an AMR where you're doing drive-bys, but there are radio endpoints. Again, whether that's for fixed or cellular, it's still a radio endpoint. And those are going to connect to on a fixed network to parts of your assets and some additional towers where needed. Okay. Now, again, it will look different for your cellular, but a heat map is done for your propagation study. This is going to determine, based on your geography and your assets that you have, what it's going to look like to install an AMI system. Okay, so this is a mapping of each meter in this location. And then that topography, you will start to get a report back that will show where collectors and repeaters need to be located, right? And then you'll get a heat map showing where kind of you're pushing the limits and where's the sweet spots. And that will help determine, as your specification, industry standard is 98.5% read rate. This is the proof in the pudding that the infrastructure being set up will cover that. Okay. So what we're going to jump into real quick that leads into our discussion is this is a high level mapping of your typical utility, right? You've got your meters, your meter reading system, it's connecting to your billing system, whether you have a customer portal yet or not. That billing system is required to connect to your financials. If you have a GIS system, it's connecting to your work orders, your asset management, inventory, whatnot. That's just high level. When you look at your AMI system, this is what you're going to be buying, right? You're going to get, whether you're doing a meter change out or not, you're going to get new endpoints, radios. You're going to have your provider's AMI network that is going to connect to a meter reading interface that you're going to have. Okay. Almost all of the newer AMI systems come with a usage portal for your customers and for yourselves. Now that's what you're going to buy. The key thing is that you're going to see conversation shift to is these are the systems that are directly impacted by your new AMI system. And for some of you that already have an AMI system, you'll be talking about how what we're describing here is directly impacted. And one of the pieces that we will be talking about is the proactive approach to making sure that you're addressing those before you install this $5, $10, $30 million system. Okay. So with that, that's about it for me. The only domain expertise I bring to this table is I make the world's best buffalo wings. So now we're going to switch to the subjects here. Okay. Right. What we're going to do is open it up for the group here. Kind of what was the driving reasons to even do it? Was it on the roadmap years before you got there? Was it a mandate? Did you see the value prop? What did you do to evaluate, to justify the spend, and talk about some of the pros and cons, and, how did the implementation affect the different departments, right? What was the buy-in? What was the resistance? What went over well? What didn't go over well? So with that, I'm going to start with ladies first. Kathleen, customer service.
Yes.
Your department is getting the direct feedback from customers on your quality of service, any water issues, and billing. How did the AMI transition go for you guys?
Actually, we started looking at various programs probably as far back as 2011. We ran, I want to say it was 4 or 5 different pilots. And honestly, we didn't probably know what we were doing because every new shiny thing that came along, we're like, oh, that's cool. But I will say we had a hard time because either the software was fabulous and it was kept up and it was secure, or it was terrible and they had good meters. So we finally did roll it out probably December of 2015. started off slow, kind of in a cluster, as we built out our infrastructure. Even to this day, we're completely built out. 7 years to complete it. Did all of our own work, didn't sub anything out. But we have holes. We have discovered that we still have holes in our infrastructure. It impacted the customer in positive ways and negative ways. So the positive effect is they can call up and say, hey, I wasn't even there and I have a huge water bill. We can generate reports by the hour and email it to them, and pretty much it's a done deal. You say, why don't you look that over? And when, after you looked at it, give us a call back and we can talk about it, because it will clearly show irrigation or round the clock usage. The negative part of it is it holds them more accountable. No longer can you hear, there's no way that I use that water, because you can prove it to them. So
question relative to your implementation. Did you have a local distributor, or did your organization work directly with the manufacturer?
we went through, I think it's a distributor. I don't know. It's because I don't want to name the company. You guys would probably know.
Okay. So let's switch over to John, who is in the middle of or the early phase of an implementation. And just to give a background, John's utility is ripping out an AMI system that didn't go well. So the city is doing what no one wants to have to do, which is ripping out a system that was selected. And so as that's in your rear view mirror, could you tell us a little bit about the type of system that you're switching to now?
Sure can. We began our first AMI installation in 2009 with a mesh network system. It did not work out well. Mesh systems basically use one endpoint to talk to another to get to a tower. So we ripped that out in 2011 and basically put in a direct AMI system. So 2011, 2013, we had a system. It was basically an endpoint to a tower. That was the only way we were able to read these. And like Kathleen said, we discovered that there were holes here and there. We had some dead zones. And the only way to get those reads in were to basically put up more towers or manually read the endpoint with a handheld, a lot of truck rolls. So the current system we've chosen, it's a hybrid system. We have our AMI structure with a frequency pickup. We have a drive-by capability in case some of our towers go offline, so we can collect certain neighborhoods if they're not coming in. And for far-reaching areas and commercial accounts, we'll have a cellular radio. And the whole goal by the city was to basically have as close to possible as 100% read rate for our meter system.
So I want to, it's really important, John, in what you guys are describing. And we've seen this with utilities, a couple that have had a bad experience with who they purchased around that, 2009 to 2012, 14 window. The technology was shifting. But what gets left out, and we see this in specifications a lot, is that contingency read. So for anybody on this call, make sure whoever you're using to do your RFP has a very clear contingency read. There are failures. And one of the systems we're working on right now that is doing a rip out, there was no drive-by capability at all. So when the AMI network was down, they'd have nothing to do. So what you described, you've covered all the bases. You got the fixed network, you got the cellular backup, and if there's a problem, you're driving by and you're getting the read. So that's something I'd like to, just bring out from our experience. And I'm going to call on Troy now, who is this Darth Vader character in the dark, but we don't know him well enough to call him a Darth Vader character, but we do appreciate him getting up before sunrise in Yakima, Washington area to join us. And Troy, I know you got a lot of, you've got a diversified background in certain cases, you work directly for manufacturers. You're, now working for the water utility in the area you're in. Could you tell us a little bit about some of the experience you're having at the utility you're at, and also maybe some stuff you learned on the other side.
Sure. So I started here in Nob Hill Water back in 2014, and I was hired away by the vendor that we use for our metering system. So I wasn't here during the initial deployment of the system we currently have. As far as I think we installed, I wasn't here. I think we went a little backwards on our installation. We too did all of our own work, and we still continue to do all of our own work. I think we got a little bit ahead of the game. We installed our endpoints, a lot of our endpoints, before any of the collectors or repeaters went up. Just we just didn't know any better. We did a heck of a job getting all the endpoints in the ground, but as it turned out, that kind of bit us in the end. I think the biggest thing that I've seen in traveling is the sales. There's not a salesperson on earth that's not going to tell you theirs is the best and it's a set it and forget it type of thing. There's so many factors to take into consideration depending on the part of the country you're in. Say we're here on the West Coast where most all of our meters are in pits, and I believe when they designed these, they weren't designed with that in mind. As it turns out, some of the nodes were not as waterproof or weatherproof as they thought. The other factor being the lid material on these water meter pits. Plastic is fine. Metal is a killer. So it's we really didn't, we heard it that they did tell us that that metal isn't the best material for these nodes, and we found that to be very, very true.
So one of the things you brought up, which was I think an important piece, is okay, we're going to do an AMI change out, and we're going to order the endpoints and let's go put them on the meters before the network's up. And what I'm gathering when you said that didn't go as well as you could, the beauty of when the network is up, and as soon as I, set up that endpoint, I'm getting feedback right away with an X amount of time frame that endpoint is actually connecting to the network. And so I can get that feedback that does help on your change out to where on the city or utility side to justify what you're paying for, right? Because your provider should be able to show, here's meter, here's serial number X, here's endpoint, Y with this serial number, and it is communicating with the network, and the utility can see that. And so if it doesn't, for the benefit to the installer is they're there. They can figure out, maybe it's a defective endpoint right off the bat and just quickly change it. So that has a big impact on, the installation company. If it's yourselves, then it's your labor. But that process, that sequence, again, I want to call out as extremely important to not get ahead of the game. Cart before the horse, whatever analogy you want to use. Troy, with your experience being with a manufacturer for a while, how much of the AMI data do you feel you guys are using, knowing like what was the sales pitch and what was supposed to be stood up? I mean, how much do you think you're using of what you should be or could be?
So I'm a bit biased towards us, but in all honesty, as far as the system that we use, and having worked with that manufacturer and travel around the country, I think it's ourselves and maybe 2 or 3 other purveyors that are taking full advantage of the system by closely monitoring the alerts. The office staff here does a phenomenal job in keeping up with those on a daily basis, calling the customer on small leaks and different things. They dispatch me out when there's no flows. So we keep on top of our alerts, and we use all options. I've seen other purveyors that that are only using the system strictly for the reads.
Mhm.
So
What do you think you know, because why do you think you guys are doing such a good job of that? Because, you know, what you described is it's learned behavior, it's training. Why do you think you guys are doing a good job? Is it a culture? Was, you know, because of your background? Was it there before?
our manager here is very well known and very she's been at it a long time, and she shoots for absolute perfection, and we come pretty darn close. It that whole set it and forget it attitude with AMI or anything else, you know, it does take maintenance. It does take a champion to be on the system, regardless of which vendor you go with. I mean, it's like a car. Out right out of the showroom, it's pretty and new and shiny and drives just fine. But if you don't maintain it, if you don't change the oil, if you don't wash it, it loses its shimmer pretty fast.
That's well put. Jason is in North Conway, New Hampshire. And for those of you around the country that are on the call right now, that is absolutely an incredibly beautiful area. So when I've been through there, I am jealous. So Jason, I know in your system, you are using cellular AMI. You started with on the larger commercial meters, and you're doing a drive-by on what is not connected to that. Could you tell us a little bit about, you know, how that process has gone and where you see the direction of that?
Yeah. So I got here about 5.5 years ago, and they were in the middle of a residential meter change out at that time. And they had elected to go with a drive-by system for the residential, which really made a lot of sense because we only read residentials quarterly. So it wasn't a huge labor burden or burden on the staff to read 4 times a year. My understanding is that was originally precipitated because the meters were old. And so as they went to upgrade the old mechanical meters, they decided to just kind of stick with the same thing with a sort of more modern device. When it came time to do the commercial meters, we read those monthly. And in a small utility, labor's always tight, right? We wear many different hats. We don't have necessarily dedicated staff who all they do is meters. And so when you're reading monthly, especially with our older technology that we had, where a lot of the radios weren't working anymore, and there was a lot of labor intensive manual reads for a number of meters. We looked at doing a fixed network, but again, we're a small utility, and it didn't make sense to kind of invest in that infrastructure for somebody our size. So we ended up going with cellular read for the commercial, really because we had great cellular coverage at the time. It was an easy plug and play, take out the old meter, put in the new meter with the cell endpoint, which we did all in-house, sort of as time allowed. And honestly, probably the biggest thing that led us towards that cellular versus just keeping with the drive-by in addition to the labor was really the data that's available. So we would get a lot of calls. I think Kathleen mentioned this earlier. Why is my bill so high? Why didn't you use all this water? Well, with the cellular now, we have that data right at our fingertips. And if we can get our customers to engage a little bit more, which is part of our job through education, we can get them to sign up for their own portal, and then they can monitor that stuff. Because we have a lot of property owners, especially on the commercial side, who are not local. So they own the properties, they manage the properties, but they kind of do it remotely. And so we would get calls all the time from people in other parts of the country saying, why is my building using so much water? I say, well, if you were there, you might know, but you're not there. So let's send you this stuff.
do you see your, are you getting more adoption? I mean, it sounds like the customer portal in that case is going to be very helpful to stop the calls coming directly to your office. How is that working out?
So far, we haven't had a single customer sign up for the customer portal, which really surprises me.
Mhm.
They still call, but now, like Kathleen said, we have the data and we send it to them. We say, here you go. We've tried to be proactive on our end. So our guy who does most of the meter stuff in-house on Mondays every week, he looks through our portal and looks for the leak alerts for different accounts. And if he sees something that's out of line, he'll proactively reach out to the customer and say, hey, we've seen this. You might want to check it out. You know, we're a small enough utility that we can do that. If we had 11,000 customers, like Troy, that wouldn't work. But where we've only got, you know, a total of 2,500 connections between residential and commercial, we're still able to do that.
So, question there is the, well, my first question is, or comment, I guess, is Troy was talking about the routine that his staff was doing to make sure that they were maximizing the availability of the data coming out of the system. What you just described on your Monday morning is by doing a routine that looks at the data and uses that data to be proactive, helps you guys a lot, right? And you know, we were working with one utility. They had a full-blown leak sensor network, and the last time we checked on it, probably 40% of the system was lit up yellow and red, and they weren't looking at it at all. So that was a perfect example, unfortunately, of not using at all what you have. And quick question, we have a question from the field here. This is for geared at towards probably Troy. With the metal lids, did it have a hole to install a pit radio, or did they have the radio mounted under the lid? You know, because I've seen it now where it's regarding this question, you know, where then they're now coming with the whole plastic piece on the top. And then I've seen other ones where it's literally, they were sticking the endpoint on the bottom of the lid. What kind do you guys have there?
So initially we were using PVC, cut PVC pipe. The nodes that we use fit perfectly on there, trying to optimize that node as close to the top of that lid as we could. And that did help. But yes, the through the lid mounts are by far the best option, and I wouldn't recommend installing with metal lids without those being in the picture. That's the only saving grace for a metal lid, is that through the lid mount.
Gotcha. And another question from the field is for Jason. Are you going to be using cellular? I mean, is there a roadmap for cellular with your residentials as you expand? I mean, what are you doing there?
Yeah, that's the plan. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to roll out all of the commercial accounts with cellular first, just to get a good handle on it on our end. And then the plan is to open it up. So if residents want to choose to have the cellular option, they can, because like with the commercials where we have a lot of people who are sort of absentee property owners, we also have a lot of second homes. And that's where we receive a lot of our complaints on the residential side is, hey, you know, I went back to wherever I live for 3 months, and then I get this quarterly water bill, and I didn't realize I left my outdoor spigot on, kind of thing. So we'll be able to not only have that data more readily available to us to prove that they did use that water, but then they can also very easily check in on their own if they're worried about it, you know, and then the ball's in their court. If they don't sign up for their own customer portal account, that's not on us, that's on them. They have that option. As far as paying for the cellular costs, the commercial folks have had no issue whatsoever. We just add the 89 cents a month to their bill, and you know, it's small potatoes for them. especially when you consider finding one leak ahead of time before you get it at the end of your monthly bill saves you way more money than that 89 cents a month does.
So that's a great point. Because we've seen even customer portals being a technology fee that's added to the bill. I'm going to switch over to Steve. You know, Steve, I know your background quite well, obviously in where you've been, but knowing you have I would call it an extremely high customer advocate transparency focus.
Yeah, I all the utilities I was in, it was my goal to provide timely, accurate bill for the water the customer intended to use. And that's exactly what I would say to anybody. That's the goal of the utility. So how do you do that? I was never, you know me well enough, Drew. I was never the smartest guy in the room. I always relied on, like this panel, a lot smarter people. So I would ask the questions which would drive the agenda.
Do you think the question I have, this is back at you, Jason, regarding North Conway. One of the questions is, you know, have you done a cellular prop study for this additional work you're going to do? Has that been done yet?
Yeah, so our distributor, our vendor, came out and did the study through the meter company, I guess. We have excellent coverage, but one of the things we have found is that we don't have capacity, right? So for those of you who've done anything in cellular, there are two aspects to cellular connectivity. One is coverage, right? Can you reach the tower from where you are? But the second one is, does the tower have enough capacity for all of the data trying to go through it? So here in North Conway, we've got plenty of coverage. All of our towers are up high. All of our stuff is down low. But what we found is that during the peak of tourism season, there's so many people on their phones that sometimes we don't have capacity in order to be able to get those reads out. So we'll find that some are actually, they're supposed to read every day, and maybe they'll read on Wednesdays and Tuesdays when there's not as much of a tourism load, but they won't read on Saturdays and Sundays when everybody's trying to figure out where they're going to order takeout from.
Okay, yeah, exactly. So much for home cooked meals when they're on vacation.
So Drew, quick question for the panelists here, if you don't mind. It sounds like all these panelists have installed these in-house. And I know that budgets can handle that a little bit better sometimes, and they can dictate stuff, but I know another model is to have a third-party vendor install all these and pull the trigger really quick, probably have to bond it as a capital project or something like that, but it stands up quicker. And now you don't have some customers on AMI, some not. They all talk at the coffee shop. I just curious their thoughts of pulling the trigger really quick versus how they've done it.
How you doing on yours, John? Are you guys using a third-party vendor, or are you doing it yourselves?
We're using a third-party vendor. As Steve said, it's, an easier load on the city employees. Right now, we've only got a couple of guys. We worked it out. It would take us 15 years to change out 30,000 meters on our own. All I can say is, write the contract for the vendors. We're going to do the installation really well, have it proofread by multiple people. And because it's usually a sealed lowest bid is how you pick your vendors.
I think what's important there is the installation is going to make the phone ring the most. Your consumer doesn't really care whether it's a brass body or, plastic or whatever. They care about those people knocking on their door and how they treated it and how dirty they got the rug. One of the questions coming in, and this is, Jason, you've definitely touched on an issue with your cellular here, is, with the, with LTE and the MDM, M1 separate bandwidth, which I've heard many stories from the cellular side that it wouldn't affect a utility because you're on the priority band part of it. What are you getting for answers of why you're getting squashed when people are ordering their takeout? And I guess the biggest question is, when you are getting squashed, what does that impact? Are you just getting your reads at a different time? Is it slower? What is the actual impact?
Yeah, so I see that question, and that was my understanding too, that it's a separate sort of bandwidth. But for whatever reason, we're still seeing the issue here in North Conway. And what we've actually found is that, our meter vendor uses two separate carriers for their endpoints, and we've had better luck with one carrier's endpoint than with the other. And I'm not sure why that is. We're still trying to figure that out.
Okay. Kathleen, over to customer service, because we've talked about the installation. You guys did it internally. Your organization is one of the few that we've worked with that has their full own construction department. So that you guys are laying your main lines, your service lines, and again, took on the project accordingly. And you've been there the whole time. How in retrospect, there's huge advantage of using your own labor, like you guys had the resources. But if you could wave a magic wand for somebody who's about to do an AMI project, it's, because you said you've been doing this and you've got, some holes you're still finding. What would you do to go back in time?
Yeah, so it is funny you mentioned that, because I was the person in the group that made the decision when we went with AMI, and I wanted it to sub it out, because it's like, let's make things happen, make them happen fast, and start reaping the rewards faster. And we did have the person power, and we did not have the acceptance of management to sub it out at that point in time. So I'm looking back, I'm glad we did it the way we did it. And the reason for that is, we started very slow, like a toe at a time. But I think that's what helped us discover, how does the system work, or was that a good practice or not? Typically it was not. And then we would sit back, regroup, think it over, like what this is called, lessons learned. What can we do different to get the result that we want? And it was a constant thing. We advertised this to the nth degree. We had flyers made up. We had it on our website. We put out a newsletter twice a year. We said, please call our office. So we got all the low hanging fruit first. Then we started doing some cold calling, and just said, probably heard about it. There's new technology out there. We want to install it in your house. And how does the customer benefit from that? That's how we sold it. It's completely rolled out. We probably have maybe between 40 and 50 accounts out of 15,000 that, for two reasons, they didn't want it. We've had customers tell us that they were allergic to Wi-Fi, or they're allergic to the components of their meter. So it was sort of like a big brother thing, and the health concerns. We researched it to the nth degree again, came up with a bullet list of this is what it's made out of. This is how often it pings. This is the impact of it, and compared it to hair dryers and microwaves and cellular phones, and showed them, this is such a teeny tiny thing. But we do live in a very green community too. So we've got a lot of people here that wear tinfoil hats. So you just have to, we also keep track of those accounts, and we say, okay, as soon as that account sells, the property, we're on them. So little by little, it is dwindling down. So
with that, and when somebody talks to you about the radio endpoint, that was one of the things that we were going to see about implementation, how many people did give you a hard time over the radio endpoints? Did you ever ask them, were they calling from their cell phone when they were talking about the radiation from the endpoint?
Oh, yes.
Just
Yes.
curious.
Yeah. And more so, like, walk in anyone's home or any business today, there's going to be Wi-Fi that is coming at you all the time, 24/7.
Yeah, but that's different. That's different.
Yeah, exactly. So, some people you could use logic with and win them over, and there's just some people you can't. So,
We have one other question here, for John. When you're changing out, doing the systems, are you changing out the meters as well as the endpoints, or are you reusing?
We're changing out both meters and endpoints right now.
Okay.
Our previous meters are 15 years old. So it's time.
Yep. And are you guys, you guys are mostly in the basement in the house, right?
Yeah, we have meters in the basement and endpoints outside. That was kind of a key selling point for us.
Right. So putting that outside, and when you were doing comparisons on manufacturers, did you see that was a different guarantee, warranty as whether or not it was inside or outside? Did you know if that was an issue?
We did 5 pilots. Some manufacturers had endpoints built into the meters. And since our last system, we had some endpoints in basements. What I noticed was that they would work for about a year or so, and then we'd lose connectivity to the ones mounted inside. So that was one of the criteria. We really held fast on endpoint outside via a wire. For our manhole accounts, I know Troy had some issues with his manhole covers. We always ran a conduit out of the manhole and mounted a transmitter on a post, because again, I was not able to get good reads with anything mounted in a pit.
Okay. The question I'm gonna switch to right now is when you're doing I'm gonna just go to this because visuals can be nice. Let's see if I can get this shared. Let's see. So when you are doing your AMI system, you're getting a new customer, your usage portal. And then we've got customer portals. Sometimes they're third party, sometimes the newer building systems are doing that. My question to everyone here, I'm going to start with Troy. Do you guys have a combined customer portal to where the customer has one portal to access both of these? Do you have just usage portal? Do you have an online payment portal?
We looked into it was an additional cost for us to have a customer portal. And I haven't seen a case study in quite some time, but someone earlier had referred to the fact that they've got it, no one's using it. Biggest thing I heard was that people kind of like a neat phone app that you might download and look at it the first time, maybe twice, and then just kind of forget about it. So right now we really don't have, as far as I know, I may be wrong on this. They may have something in the office that I'm unaware of, but I don't believe there's an official customer portal that we use here.
Okay. And John, you're in the middle of doing this implementation. Do you know if that's been laid out to where your customer portal for the usage that you're now going to have, basically live data accessible to the customer, and is that going to connect to a portal for payment?
That was pretty important. That was pretty important to us. Selection for the contractors, current meters, we mandated that they give us an email address. We'll use that email address to send out the customer portal invitation. I will extreme. With a complaint, we'll sign them up right then and there on the customer portal. They can view our reviews.
I think I lost you a little bit there. Kathleen, your system is, how is that working out for you guys? What have you guys done?
So as Troy said, we do not use the one provided by the AMI company. And it was an additional cost. And There was a study, and I can't recall who did it, but it was someone in the industry, and they said something like 4 or 5% of your customer base will use the portal. So it just didn't make sense, for that kind of a cost. And it was an annual cost. It wasn't a one-time cost. So what we did is we switched billing softwares in January of 2023. They have a customer portal where they can do more of the financial piece of business. So they can sign up for auto pay, paperless, have their own payment methods, change their dates, whatever. And it does not include the meter portion, but that's what, I can't recall which one of you said it. Maybe it was Jason. We do monitor the alerts every single day. There's one person assigned to it, and he's kind of a bridge between customer service and field services. And he'll actually log it right on the billing software, call the customer, told them, this is what I told them, so that customer service team can know what the scoop is when they pick up the phone. We do also tell people it's not a guarantee. We do our very best to let you know. But there are times when it's a weekend, or the way the alert's set up, it has to run for 3 consecutive days before it will even ping an alert. We do our best. That's all we can really say about it.
So, and what's interesting, and on this panel, you're the one on the front lines for billing and customer issues. What did you do to drive user adoption of that portal for payment? And what about is your current usage of sign up?
We advertised the heck out of it. We talked about it in the newsletter. We're switching. It's going to be a great benefit to the customer. We were getting, in the beginning, probably like even 20 people signing up a day, which was phenomenal. I think out of 15,000, we probably, I should have looked before this class. I bet we've got a quarter of them or a third of them signed up on the portal. And in part, we had an old portal, and we could get in there. Number one, it's not a good practice as a business to have people's financial information in any way, but this puts them in charge. And that's what we say. It's like, this is for your security that you're signing in.
So what we've seen, just as anybody who calls customer service, once your portal is established, your customer service people should be telling each person that calls in. And I know that's what you've done there, but in general, we've reached pretty much our limit. So what I'd like to do is, starting with Troy, since you were the first one bright and early on the call here, if you have any, closing comments of words of advice to anybody, whether it's the selection or the implementation of a new AMI system.
Sure. Yeah. Research. There's a ton of information out there. I know salespeople do their best, and they're good people. But call around, look around, Google who's got what, and give them a call. See what's working for them, and pilot program. Those are important, and go ahead and run 3, 4, 5 pilots at one time. See what works best for you. Test drive every car before you purchase one.
I will, that is good advice. Jason, you're in the middle of doing some shifts. What's your advice that you would give somebody as they're starting to slowly or fully implement something like this?
I would say work with somebody who you can trust. So we've been very fortunate to have 2 separate vendors for our 2 separate meter technologies. And we've had excellent working relationships with both of them. And when we call, they're right there to answer the question, to drive over and help us work through it. And I think a couple people have mentioned this. There's nothing that exists that is 100% bug free. So if you can get that good support, that's huge.
John, how about you, as you're again still on the honeymoon?
I would say, again, like Troy said, run pilots. All these media companies will offer a pilot. That's, you guys hear me okay? Sorry about that. Aside from the pilots, make sure that the stock can be delivered. Make sure there's no supply chain issues with these meters you're going to be buying, because it's no good if you can't get them in. And lastly, see if you can get a local distributor. So if you ever need help, you don't have to go overseas to get parts. That would be my suggestions.
Steve, what's your parting words here?
Well, I think everybody that doesn't have AMI and is on this to listen, I applaud you for attending. But you should also think our customer demographics are changing. The older people who do not want this technology are passing on, and the new people who want to see their water bill on their phone are the new customers. So if you're not thinking about it, you really should be.
I think I've got one question here, and again, I know we're supposed to be by 11. That's why I start the close up at 10 of to make sure. But we have a question here. Looking back on each one of your deployments, would anyone favor the development of a third-party MDM, which is not provided by a specific AMI manufacturer? This would allow software investment to be preserved in a manner that frees a utility in the AMI manufacturer's limitation. So basically, that there's some new advanced MDM technology out there. Did you guys at the time, or have you even heard of the ability of getting that third party specialized MDM compared to the one that comes with the manufacturer? Did anybody address that or was even aware of it? Okay. I think that's a great question, because it is, I would call it up and coming technology that is, customer service portals. Almost every billing system that we work with now has a customer service portal. 5 years ago, you needed a third party. So there's technology that you should definitely be aware of. Troy, you kind of brought this up, and it was a car analogy, which anybody who's ever worked with me knows I like to do it. A lot of the systems that are out there, they're great systems, but every utility that we come across has different processes and different demands and different operations. And the way that I do it is, a minivan is a great vehicle. A brand new pickup truck is a great vehicle. If that utility is planning on buying a boat, does it come with a tow hitch, or are they planning on having kids? Right. So the minivan becomes extremely appropriate, or not. So I think that you guys, everyone should look at what's good for their utility and then back into the provider to make sure it's a good fit, because there is not a single fit for everybody. That's what we've seen. And I want to thank everybody for their time. The panelists, especially, who got on early. Again, Troy brings a new meaning of on early for us. And I want to thank everyone who's participating that took the time. And for any of the main people looking for their license credits, please either put it in the chat, or you do have an email from us that you can respond, so we can make sure that you do get the license credits. And if anybody wants to, please feel free to either email us and ask what you would like in the next webinar. We have a couple choices that we're going to be doing, and any feedback from the audience would be appreciated. So thank you guys and gals, Kathleen, for sharing your industry knowledge and trying to help an industry as a whole with your time. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks for having us.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Take
All
care.
right, take care all.